Our cameras capture this world in a two-dimensional space, and it's our job as filmmakers or photographers to make that two-dimensional image look more three-dimensional. And one of the most powerful tools to be able to achieve that is lighting. Lighting helps us add shape and texture and dimension to our scene. So real quick, we're gonna take a look at this interview scene, and I'm gonna show you how I went from this shot to this shot, all using lighting. Hey everyone, Tyler Edwards here. I'm a filmmaker and DP, and I have Chelsea here sitting in as the talent for this interview setup. And well, it's now storming. I set all this up before it started storming, but that's the good thing about continuous lighting is your set never really changes with continuous lighting. So in this video, I'm gonna show you how I set up all the lighting and what the motivation for these different lights were. So that being said, let's go ahead and jump into it. So real quick, we'll kind of take a look at the frame we've got here. We've got this nice big bay window here, some nice kind of evening looking sunlight coming in through the background. We've got a lamp going on, just a nice casual looking interview setup, and everything looks nice and natural, and that's kind of what we're going for in this setup. So let's go ahead and jump into it and first talk about the key light. All right, so for our key light, we have the Aputure 300D Mark II inside of this giant softbox. The reason why I have it in a softbox is to make this key light nice and soft, because that 300D is a point source light, meaning it starts off as a really hard light source. So we want to make that light source bigger and softer. So that's why we're using this softbox here. Now, as you can see here, there's this giant window, this kind of like bay window right here, that is kind of the motivation for our key light. So as you can see, if you look at the frame, that light is coming from the same side as that window. And I've intentionally put a little bit of this window inside of the frame of the camera where you would expect that light to come from. So if I had the key light on the other side of Chelsea here, it would look really unnatural because our eyes would expect to see the light coming from this window. That's what we're talking about with motivated light. There's something inside of the frame that's motivating this key light. In this instance, it's this giant window. So as you can see here, this key light is giving a really nice soft fall off on her face. It's kind of got a little bit of a Rembrandt triangle here, which is a really popular lighting technique. And it's overall just looks really pleasing. And because this light source is such a big light source and it's so close to her face, it's just giving really nice soft shadows. But it doesn't look too sourcey or overdone. It looks really natural. So if I turn this light on and off, you can kind of see what I'm talking about. This is with the key light off. And when I turn it on, it just looks like nice and natural. She pops from the background, but it doesn't look too sourcey. And you can kind of see in her eyes, you can see the softbox there, which gives a really nice catch light in her eyes. All right, so next up, let's talk about this hair light right here. So I'll turn it on and off so you can kind of see what I'm talking about. And this hair light is being lit by an Amaran P60C, and I've got it at about 30%, and it's really subtle. It's just enough to kind of help give her a little bit of an edge right here and give her a little bit of dimension, a little bit more exposure on this side of her face, really just her hair. And you can see when I toggle it on and off, it's pretty subtle, but with it, it just kind of makes her pop. Now, this light is being motivated by this practical. So this practical is serving two purposes. Number one, it looks good in the set. It's acting as a practical. Practical lights are essentially any light source that is in the frame. So that could be a candle, a lamp, whatever the case may be. So this practical, if I turn it on and off, you can see it's giving just a little bit of exposure there on that back chair, but also it is serving as motivation for this hair light and this kind of backlight right here. So again, if I turn off the hair light, you can see what's going on here. There's kind of nothing going on. When I turn it on, you can see even just on her shoulder right here, it looks like that light is coming actually from the lamp instead of some artificial light source, wherever it may be. All right, so those are the lights that are kind of lighting the talent. Primarily, we have the key light, which is the primary light that's lighting Chelsea. And then we have that practical in the background that's motivating the hair light and the backlight. So that being said, there are a few more things that we can do to really kind of paint the scene a little bit more. I've always said that the scene is your canvas, the light is your paint, and then the modifiers are your paint brushes. So think of it that way. We're adding a lot of paint, and paint brushes are adding these strokes of light. So this is what we're gonna start doing now, is starting to add a little bit more texture with different lights. One of the first things we're gonna do is we're gonna try to balance the exposure of this room a little bit more so that it doesn't look too dark in the background. And what we're gonna use for that is an Aputure 600D Pro. It's a really bright light. I've actually only got it at about 37%, so we probably could use even a lower output light, but this is what the light that I have in my kit, so I'll show you what we've got going on with that. Right here, I've got the 600D Pro, and I've got the F10 barn doors on there, and it's just simply throwing into the ceiling here just to kind of give a little bit of exposure. And I'm using the barn doors to help cut that light so it doesn't hit in the corner over here, so it's not in frame. But what this light is doing is just giving a little bit of exposure to the background here. So once again, if I toggle this on and off, you can see how much of a difference this makes. So if you see right now, that background is pretty dark, and this interview setup just looks a little bit too moody. So what I do is adding that 600D, just bouncing into the ceiling, just kind of lightens up that room a little bit more and just kind of gives the exposure a little bit more balance, so it just feels a little bit more natural. All right, so next up, this is just a small little touch just to make things a little bit more balanced and look a little bit more natural. And that's with these two lights, the Amarin T4Cs. So what I've got these lights doing is essentially just giving a little bit of exposure to this couch so it just doesn't fall off into the darkness. So let's go ahead and toggle these on and off so you can see what I mean. All right, so here's the shot without any of the tube lights on, and you can see, in my opinion, I just think the couch looks a little bit too dark there in the corner. So the first light we turn on is this one right here, and as you can see just in the corner, it's just got a little bit of exposure there just to kind of mimic that light coming in through that window. And then next up, this next light's another tube light we have, just turns on and just again adds just a little bit of exposure to the side of that couch. Now what I've done here is I've just added this little screen right here, and that's really just to prevent any of the light spill from these tube lights, because I don't have any grids or anything for them. It just prevents any of that exposure, any of that light spill to affect any of the light hitting the talent here. And then next up, I just added this right here, and that's just to prevent the exposure up here from really spilling onto that back wall over there, just so that this light over here that we'll talk about in just a second pops even more. All right, and the final and last light that I added for this scene was actually outside, and that's the Aputure 600X Pro, which is a fantastic light because it is bi-color, meaning you can change the color temperature of it. So I set this to about 4,500 Kelvin, and that's just kind of giving a nice warm light coming through to kind of making it look like late afternoon sun or something like that coming through. And it's also kind of helping with motivating the light even more now that it's storming outside and we lost quite a bit of light because of that. This is kind of still helping motivate that key light. And the other thing that it's doing is it's just adding a little bit of texture to this back wall, because as you can see, there's nothing really on this back wall. So having a little bit of texture, some shadow texture, I really like seeing that because it looks just nice and dramatic, and just kind of helps sell that there's kind of some sunlight coming from outside. And as you can see on this frame with the 600X Pro off, it just looks kind of flat and uninteresting, but as soon as I turn it on, you can start seeing it's got a lot more dramatic shadows. It's giving even a little bit of an edge to that lighter pillow back there. It's kind of giving a little bit of exposure to that plant back there. That light there on that windowsill looks a lot more dramatic, but it balances out the image, adds a lot more texture without it looking distracting. And this light is actually a fantastic way to fake a motivated light source. So as you can see here behind me, this looks like there's window light coming from behind me, and you don't see in this current frame, you don't see a window or anything like that in the frame. So say you actually didn't have a window to begin with. Well, you can use attachments or use a cookie or something to cut out a window shape or something and throw the light through that to create some kind of texture pattern on that back wall. And that kind of helps fake motivation for a key light. So now that I've kind of showed you each of these lights individually, now let's take a look at this scene starting from scratch and kind of build on this scene with one light at a time, just kind of show you how each of these lights are affecting the image and adding texture and dimension to the overall image. Well, I sure hope you were able to find something helpful or useful in this video. Thank you so much for watching. Lighting plays such a massive role in filmmaking and photography for that matter. So it's so important to understand the basics, and the only way to get better at it is to just practice, practice, practice. Well, thank you so much for watching, and stay tuned for more tips and tutorials.